Babylon is a place that has crucial significance for all of us. Not even secularists can deny the importance of Babylon to our understanding of the present, despite the special relevance Babylon has for Christians. The majority of discussions about Babylon, from a Christian perspective, reference the historical place or an existing institution which is supposed to be the spiritual descendant of the historical place. Many Christians think the spiritual Babylon might be the Catholic Church. Others suggest the U.S. is Babylon, others say capitalism is what is referenced in Revelations. However, there is no reason to suppose Babylon in both manifestations, the historical and the spiritual versions, relate to two physical cities or structures. The prophetic version is more likely to be a conceptualization and express the major elements of the city. The physical great city is the historical Babylon. Erected on the Euphrates in the valley Indus Valley with the Tigris only 20 miles distant, Babylon is the most famous city of ancient Mesopotamia. Its ruins can be seen in modern-day Iraq 59 miles southwest of Baghdad. Babylon served for nearly 2 millennia as a center of Mesopotamian civilization. The fall of Babylon in 539 BC marked the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Cyrus the Great in 539 invaded Babylonia and claimed to be the legitimate successor of the ancient Babylonian kings. The historical Babylon is easy enough to find. But what of the prophetic Babylon, the one spoken of so poetically in Daniel and Revelations? This search is more problematical. We know from the Bible that Babylon was founded by Nimrod. In the scriptural account of its formation, Nimrod built Babylon along with several other cities of Mesopotamia. Nimrod, because of this, is considered the world's first emperor. The city and the Great Tower of Babel were both erected around 2242 BC. The excavations of what is called Babylon are, however, thought to be of a later city built by Hammurabi, r. 1792–1750 BC, higher up from the river. Nebuchadnezzar 605–562 BC, having inherited the city from his father, renovated the city. It was he who built the 91-meter tower or ziggurat of Etemenenki atop the temple of Marduk, the high god of Babylon. Called the House of the Frontier between heaven and earth. This is also considered to be the site of the earlier Tower of Babel. Further south, Sargon of Akkad was founding the Assyrian Empire, which would later take over the northern kingdom. Following Hammurabi's death, his empire fell apart and Babylonia dwindled in size and scope until Babylon was sacked by the Hittites, in 1595 BCE. The Kassites followed the Hittites. The Assyrians then followed the Kassites. The Assyrian ruler Sennacherib, r. 705–681 BCE, was in power when Babylon revolted. Sennacherib had the city sacked, razed, and the ruins scattered as a lesson to others. After the fall of the Assyrian Empire, a Chaldean named Nabopolassar took the throne of Babylon and, through careful alliances, created the Neo-Babylonian Empire. His son, Nebuchadnezzar II, r. 605–604–562 BCE, renovated the city so that it covered 900 hectares, 2,200 acres, of land and boasted some of the most beautiful and impressive structures in all of Mesopotamia. Esarhaddon, r. 681–669 BCE, rebuilt Babylon and returned it to its former glory. Ashurbanipal of Nineveh, r. 668–627 BCE, who besieged and defeated the city, did not damage it to any great extent. Babylon means the gate of the gods and Babel means confusion. Babylon and Babel has come to represent not just mankind's attempt to dethrone God but also the confusion that is created as a consequence. The innovation or development that serves to define Babylon is the Hammurabi Code, a codex created by Babylon's most memorable ruler. But Babylon is also noted biblically for the establishment of the city-state and instituting a professional bureaucracy. The concept of government, in other words, comes from this point in time. Of the many, many thousands of clay tablets found in and around Babylon, many record daily activities. Many of these tablets are records and letters, but most deal with the administration of the great bureaucracy based on the temple. The power of Babylon was not just in its warcraft but in its economic prowess and professional bureaucracy. Babylon developed methods used to operate a sophisticated economy. Temples served as financial centers and markets. The major features of trade and bookkeeping were developed by the temple authorities. More than 16,000 cuneiform tablets from one location contain records of taxes and payments and rations to workers. Other tablets record a flourishing trade in textiles. One location yielded 1,000 legal documents. Tablets contain lists of wages paid, a contract for stating the conditions under which a piece of land was sold. Also discovered was a basket of tablets that provided the headlines of tablets in other locations. There is evidence that the market was similar to what exists 4,000 years later. Temples appear to be organized as a redistributive system dealing with incoming rents and gifts and outgoing rations and wages. Temple income was derived from investments, land donated by kings, and also from occasional dedications of the spoils of war, precious objects, and prisoners of war. In at least one case, all forms of payment were assessed by an expert assayer in terms of its equivalent in ingots. The silver received was placed in a wickerwork cash box, and the smiths received a special beer allowance for the hot work of melting it down. This system was still used later by Solomon. As it happens, most records refer to temple transactions, although there is evidence that a similar system of accounting and record-keeping was used by the palace. The temple also received payments intended for the king. Some of the earliest records show a distinction between exchangeable and non-exchangeable goods. Exchangeable goods could be transferred without formality and included gold, silver, other metals, commodities such as oil, yeast, beer, wool, leather, papyrus, and weapons. Thus, the idea of a standard for exchange, if not a single monetary currency, was established. The kingdom had a financial market. Exchange rates for exchangeable goods were posted for both current and future times. Loans and promissory notes were in use. These referred to the future values of the commodities' exchange rates, for instance, to be paid, according to the rate of exchange, valid, in the month X. There are a large number of old Babylonian records which deal with temple loans in which the temple appears as the creditor. Temples must have had the resources to act as banks and operated as financial centers. The transactions could get complicated. In one transaction, the same person is recorded as part creditor, part debtor. There was an understanding of liabilities and credit and debits. One tablet lists, X shekels of silver belonging to Samus are at the disposal of PN, whatever, business, plan he sets afoot and, whatever, it will yield belongs to Samus. This loan is unusual, in that it is not witnessed. 7 preconditions are needed for the development of bookkeeping. These are, the art of writing, arithmetic, private property, money, credit, commerce, and capital. These things are important and indeed central to modern civilization centered on the nation-state with a professional bureaucracy based on law and a fiduciary monetary system based on assets. There are other things considered important in a modern economy, such as democracy, but China and other countries demonstrate an economy can operate without the presence of a liberal democracy. The key ingredients of civilization originated in Babylon. What is more to the point is that the key ingredients of civilization, at least in the world's idea of what a civilization is, generate confusion. Not the confusion created at Babel specifically. At Babel, language was confused, which hindered mankind's ability to communicate. However, these elements of civilization have much the same impact. The state was the key development introduced by Babylon. It was operated by law, used a state-issued currency to operate a market that kept records and understood the concept of private ownership. To better understand what Babylon stands for and why these developments ushered in 600 years of confusion, we need to introduce and understand one simple principle, that if betrayed creates no end of injustice and social harm, but if followed creates prosperity and peace. This is the principle or doctrine of ownership. That which is created belongs to the Creator. Labor is the only viable source for the legitimization of ownership. That which is claimed by he or she who did not create it, is stolen or gained by guile. That which is not gained by labor or the exchange of labor is possessed by means that are not just or legitimate. If we understand this doctrine, we will easily understand what went wrong 6,000 years ago. The state, legal or human rights, double-entry bookkeeping based on the use of assets as money, licensed ownership or ownership as a human or political right, and our legal systems or law, are all part and parcel of a system that divides labor from the value it creates. These factors are all tools to delegitimize labor and empower parasites. This is Babylon. These are the 5 great errors. It is this complex of ideas known as the 5 great errors that has been a constant throughout human history. They are interlocked and function together. In one way or another, they bring down civilizations, not overnight but by an ever-increasing friction that makes everything harder to do and cost more if done. It is no accident that these soft technologies were developed along with the world's first state. They were necessary to the state. It is not the state, however, that is the problem. The problem is inequality and injustice. All of this enables parasitism. One cannot have parasites without the 5 great errors, and with them one will always have parasites, and once this infection has taken hold, civilization will be impossible or gradually eroded. There is a first principle that must be adhered to but which Babylon contravenes. We call it the doctrine of ownership or the right of all beings to own what they create. The principle could also be restated as the right of all creative beings to own what they create. The question is, how did Babylon circumvent this principle and why? The state produces nothing. Some will argue that the state provides a service. This is not so. A hamburger business provides a service. It cooks and serves hamburgers. Cleaning companies, lawyers, and consultants all provide services. A service company provides something of value in exchange for payment. Governments create law. This might be considered a service of sorts, if it was issued in response to a demand. The state also administrates the market, usually through the provision of regulations, specific to a sector. Thus, banks are regulated through the issuance of a banking act. But there is no relationship between what the state does and the funds it collects. The state does not provide roads and other infrastructure. Construction companies build roads, bridges and other social goods. The state does not even collect taxes. This is done by people working for the state. Nor does the government pay for roads etc., because governments have no money. Governments act more as a broker than it does as a service provider. Governments rob Peter to pay Paul. But it is Paul who does the work. In the process, Peter gets infrastructure and other things built which he may or may not want. The point of the discussion is that those who produce goods and services are not getting the full value of what they do, it is taxed and leached away by governments and other agents. What is more, what they get is often something they would rather pay to not get. Babylon is composed of the technology needed to allow the exploitation of labor by the state and the agents of the state. Babylon is composed of the tools the state needs to exploit those who justly own the wealth of a nation. The state is nothing more than a set of tools created to legitimize the leeching and parasitic activity of the state. But it is all a con game, but the system is built to always prove the state is needed and its costs justified, regardless of how it strips the people of their wealth and ability to build and maintain their civilization.